You think betrayal is loud, explosive, obvious. It is not. The real damage happens in silence, in small shifts you feel, but struggle to explain. You sit there, right next to her, and something feels off. You cannot name it yet, but you feel it in your chest. And here is the part most men get wrong. You think the pain will come from finding out. No, the pain comes from not knowing while you are still giving everything. You kiss her, you hold her, you trust the moment, and something inside you whispers, this is not the same. You ignore it. That is where it starts, because when you ignore what you feel, you slowly train yourself to accept less without questioning it. And that quiet acceptance, that is where self-respect begins to slip. So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt a shift in her, but convinced yourself it meant nothing? Think about that, because what you are about to see will make you revisit moments you brushed aside. And once you see it clearly, you will not look at those moments the same way again. You notice it, but you ignore it at first. Then something else starts repeating. This is where most people get confused, because the signs never arrive all at once. They build slowly, quietly, almost politely. And if you miss the early ones, the later ones hit harder. Now pay attention, because the first sign does not scream. It whispers. Number 1, the cold silence of her body. There is a kind of silence that has nothing to do with words. You feel it through touch. You feel it in how she responds to you. And if you have been with her long enough, you already know her patterns. You know how she used to lean into you without thinking. You know how her body used to respond before you even asked. That kind of connection does not need effort. It flows. Now compare that to this. You reach for her, and something feels delayed. You lean in to kiss her, and she slightly turns away. Not fully, just enough for you to notice. You put your hand on her shoulder at night, and instead of softening, she stiffens. You feel it. But you tell yourself it is nothing. You tell yourself she is tired. You tell yourself life is just getting busy. But deep down, you know the difference between tired and distant. Tired still responds. Distant withdraws. That difference matters. A man who pays attention understands this early. A man who ignores it ends up confused later. Here is a simple moment. You come back from a long day, you sit next to her, you expect that small moment of closeness, maybe a smile, maybe a touch. Instead, she stays in her space. No tension, no connection, just neutral. And neutral feels colder than rejection, because at least rejection shows emotion. Neutral shows absence. What happens next changes everything. You try again. You lean closer. You initiate more. You try to recreate what used to be natural. But the more you try, the more forced it feels. Now you are not responding to connection anymore. You are chasing it. That shift is dangerous, because once you start chasing what used to come naturally, you lose your position without realizing it. Here is the truth most men avoid. When a woman is fulfilled somewhere else, she does not return with desire. She returns with calm. Not peaceful calm, satisfied calm. And satisfaction leaves no hunger for you. You felt it. You ignored it. Now it is repeating. And here is where denial enters. You begin to explain it away. You say maybe it is stress. Maybe it is routine. Maybe this is what happens in long relationships. No. Attraction does not disappear randomly. It shifts. And when it shifts, it moves somewhere. A man who understands patterns sees this clearly. A man who avoids discomfort keeps explaining until it is too late. So what do you do here? You do not react emotionally. Instead of pushing forward, you pull back slightly. You stop initiating for a moment. You give space, and you watch. Not to punish, to understand. Because if the connection is still there, she will reach for you. Maybe not immediately, but she will. If she does not, the silence grows, and silence always tells the truth. Stop for a second. Think about that. Because this is where most men lose control. They feel the distance, and instead of observing, they increase effort. More attention, more affection, more energy, and all it does is confirm one thing. You are trying to earn something that used to be given freely. That realization should hit you hard, because love does not need to be chased when it is real. Now here is the deeper layer. The body always reveals before words do, before explanations, before excuses, before stories. Her body shows you the truth early, and if you ignore it, you train yourself to accept confusion. This is where most men get trapped. They wait for proof. They want something obvious, something undeniable. But life does not work like that. Reality shows up in patterns, not dramatic moments. And by the time you get the dramatic moment, you already ignored 10 quiet ones. So instead of waiting for confirmation, you learn to read shifts, small changes, repeated behavior, energy differences. That is where clarity lives. Now let me show you something else. Because when the body goes quiet, something else starts getting louder. And most men miss this part completely. Number 2, the cleansing ritual. At first, it looks harmless, even positive. She comes in and she heads straight to clean up. Longer showers, new scents, fresh clothes. Everything looks put together. And that is exactly why you ignore it, because it looks like self-care. But here's the problem. It's not about the action, it's about the change. You notice it, but you brush it aside. She never used to rush like this before. She never used to care this much about immediate cleaning. But now, it is consistent. And consistency is where patterns live. Here is a simple scenario. She gets home, no conversation, no pause, straight to the bathroom, longer than usual. You sit there waiting. You tell yourself it is normal, but something in your mind stays alert. Then she comes out. Fresh, too fresh, different scent, different energy, and you feel it again, but you silence it. This is where self-deception begins, because you do not want to confront what it might mean. So you replace truth with comfort. You call it hygiene, you call it routine, you call it growth. But deep down you are avoiding the real question. Why the sudden change? A man who understands behavior does not focus on single actions. He focuses on patterns, and patterns always tell a story. Now here is the psychology behind it. A woman knows her body carries traces. Contact, energy. So when there is something to hide, she removes the evidence. Not only physically, mentally. She resets before facing you, and the more effort she puts into that reset, the more unnatural it becomes. You notice it, but you ignore it at first. Then, something else starts repeating. Now the timing lines up. Late returns followed by immediate cleaning. New scents appearing without explanation. Clothes changing at odd times. And suddenly, it is no longer random, it is structured. This is where most people get confused, because they still want to believe in coincidence. But patterns do not happen by accident. They repeat with purpose. So what do you do here? You do not accuse. You do not react emotionally. You observe deeper. You connect timing with behavior. You track consistency. Because truth reveals itself through repetition, not confrontation. And here is the mistake many men make. They see it, they feel it, but they laugh it off. They even compliment it. You say, "You smell nice." You reinforce it, without realizing you are rewarding something you do not understand. That is how you become blind by choice. And once you choose blindness, everything after becomes harder to face. So shift your focus. Stop labeling everything as harmless. Start asking one simple question. Does this match who she used to be with me? If the answer is no, pay attention. Because change always has a reason, and when that reason stays hidden, it grows, quietly, steadily, until it becomes impossible to ignore. But here is where it gets deeper, because physical actions are only one side. Underneath all of this, something else starts building. Pressure. And pressure always leaks, not through honesty, through behavior. Because when guilt starts growing, it does not stay silent. It finds a way out. And the way it comes out next will confuse you even more. Because instead of distance, you start seeing something else. Something that looks like conflict. And that is where the next sign begins. But what it means is not what you think. Because when pressure builds inside her, it does not come out as honesty. It comes out as redirection. And if you are not paying attention, you will spend your time fixing problems that were never yours. You notice the shift, but you misread the source. This is where most men get pulled into confusion. Number 3, the blame game, unjustified irritation. At first, it feels small, a comment here, a complaint there. You brush it off. You think maybe she had a long day, but then it keeps happening. You walk into the room, and instead of calm, you feel tension. You say something simple, and her response comes sharp. You sit next to her, and somehow you are the problem. You feel it, but you try to fix it. That is the trap. Here is a simple moment. You come home, you greet her, and before the moment settles, she points out something you did wrong. Not something serious. Something small. The way you placed something. The way you spoke earlier. The way you exist in that moment. And suddenly, you are defending yourself. You explain. You justify. You try to calm the situation. But nothing changes. Because the issue is not what you did. It is what she is carrying. This is where most people get confused. Because it feels personal. But it is not about you. It is about her internal conflict. A man who understands behavior sees this clearly. When guilt builds, a person looks for relief. And one of the easiest ways to feel less guilty is to shift blame. If she makes you the problem, she doesn't have to face herself. So she rewrites the story. In her version, you are distant. You are inattentive. You are not enough. And once that story settles, her actions feel justified in her mind. You felt it, you ignored it. Now it is repeating. And here is the mistake. You try to prove her wrong. You argue. You defend your actions. You try to bring logic into an emotional situation. But logic does not dissolve guilt. It fuels the cycle. Because every time you defend, you step into the role she created. You become the man who needs to explain himself. And once you accept that role, you lose control of the frame. So what do you do instead? You step out. Not aggressively, not emotionally, calmly. She complains about something small. You listen. You do not argue. You do not justify. You respond with clarity. You say this is not about what you are saying. And then you stop. Let the silence sit. That silence forces reality back into the moment, because when you do not play along, the script breaks. Now she has to sit with what she is projecting. Stop for a second. Think about that. Because this one shift changes everything. You move from reacting to observing, from defending to understanding, from confusion to clarity. And once you see it, you cannot unsee it. Now, here is where it gets deeper. Because irritation is only one outlet. There is another place where truth shows up without words, and most men avoid looking there. Number 4, the body does not lie. You already know her. You know her patterns, her reactions, her rhythm. That is why when something changes, you feel it immediately, even if you do not say it out loud. Here is a simple moment. You are close to her, maybe sitting together, maybe lying down. Everything looks normal on the surface, but something feels different. Her body feels tense, or in some cases, too relaxed in a way that feels disconnected. Her responses do not match the moment. You notice it, but you hesitate to trust it. This is where most men betray themselves, not because they lack awareness, because they doubt what they feel. You tell yourself it might be stress, it might be hormones, it might be something temporary. And yes, those things exist, but pattern matters. Consistency matters. Sudden change matters. A man who pays attention does not jump to conclusions, but he does not ignore repeated signals, because your senses are not random. They pick up shifts before your mind explains them. You felt it. You ignored it. Now it is repeating. And every time you ignore it, you weaken your own judgment. That is the real danger. Because once you stop trusting what you feel, you become easy to mislead. Now here's the mistake. You try to fix it. You increase effort, more attention, more affection, more energy, thinking that giving more will bring her back. But effort does not restore desire. Awareness does. So shift your focus. Instead of chasing her response, observe her consistency. Pull back slightly, not as punishment, as clarity. Give space and watch what happens. If the connection is still there, it will show. If it is not, the absence becomes clear. And clarity protects you from wasting time. Strength is not pretending everything is fine. Strength is facing what you already feel, even when it is uncomfortable, because avoiding truth does not protect you. It delays the impact, and delayed impact always hits harder. Now here is where things twist, because not every sign shows up as distance. Sometimes the opposite happens. And this is where most men fall into false comfort. Number 5. Excessive affection, the theater of guilt. At first, it feels like relief. After distance, after tension, after confusion, she suddenly becomes warm, closer, more affectionate. She touches you more. She speaks softer. She looks at you in a way that feels emotional. And your first reaction is hope. You think things are getting better, but something still feels off, because the timing does not match. This is where most people get confused, because you want to believe in the improvement. You want to believe she is coming back. You stop observing. You relax. But that is when you miss the truth. Here is a simple moment. She was distant earlier, cold, unavailable. Then suddenly, she comes close. She hugs you longer than usual. She says something emotional. She shows affection that feels almost intense. And instead of asking why, you accept it. But the question matters. Where is this coming from? A man who understands behavior asks that. Because real affection is consistent. It does not appear in waves after unexplained gaps. So when it does, it carries a different energy. Not desire, relief. She is not connecting with you. She is trying to reduce something inside her. Guilt. And the fastest way to reduce guilt is to act loving, to balance the scale internally. You felt it. You ignored it. Now it is repeating. And here is the mistake. You reward it. You respond with more openness, more trust, more emotional investment. You think this is your chance to rebuild. But you are responding to performance, not connection. And that difference matters. Because performance fades, truth stays. So what do? You observe the pattern. Does the affection stay consistent? Or does it disappear again after some time? Does it feel natural or slightly exaggerated? Does it align with her behavior overall? Or does it contradict it? Those questions keep you grounded. They stop you from getting pulled into emotional swings. Now listen, you do not reject affection, but you do not get blinded by it. You stay aware. You stay steady. Because awareness protects your position. And here is the deeper truth. Guilt creates temporary warmth, but it cannot sustain real connection. So if the warmth fades again, it confirms what you already felt earlier. Now things move to a deeper level. Because when affection becomes inconsistent, and connection starts fading, something else begins to break. And this one hits harder than all the others, because it happens in a place where there is no room for pretending, or at least it should not be. But it still happens, and when it does, it changes how you see everything. Number 6, emotional absence in intimacy. This is where illusion ends, and reality becomes impossible to ignore. But what it reveals goes deeper than what you expect. Because when emotional absence enters intimacy, nothing feels direct anymore. Everything feels hollow. You notice it in the smallest details first, then it grows into something you cannot ignore. You are close to her, same space, same routine, same setting, but something feels missing inside the moment. Her body responds, but her presence does not match it. You feel it in her eyes, you feel it in her timing, you feel it in the way she disconnects, even while she is physically there. And you sit there, trying to understand it. That confusion is the first signal. A man who has experienced real connection before always notices this shift. Because real intimacy carries alignment. When that alignment disappears, the difference is obvious, even if no words are spoken. You felt it. You ignored it. Now it is repeating. Here is a simple moment. You reach for her. She responds, but not fully. She participates, but without depth. Her reactions feel mechanical, not wrong, just empty. And that emptiness says more than rejection ever could. Because rejection has emotion. Absence has none. This is where most men start making mistakes. They try to fix it in the moment. They increase effort. They try to bring back the spark. More attention, more closeness, more patience, thinking something will change if they try harder. But effort does not replace presence. You cannot force connection into a space where it is no longer alive. So what happens next? You begin adjusting yourself instead of reading the situation. You start performing for something that is no longer responding to you. And slowly, you lose your own awareness inside the process. Stop for a second. Think about that. Because this is where self-respect starts slipping quietly. Not through betrayal, through overgiving. Now here is the truth. When emotional absence shows up during intimacy, it rarely exists alone. It spreads into timing, into behavior, into daily interaction. And that is where the next pattern appears. Number 7, the late returns, empty excuses. At first, it feels explainable. She is late. She has reasons, work, friends, unexpected situations. You listen, you accept. You want to believe it, because believing is easier than questioning. But then it repeats, and repetition removes doubt. You start noticing a pattern, not in one moment, in many. She leaves, she returns late, she explains. But the explanation feels lighter each time, less grounded, less clear, and something in you starts paying attention. Here is a simple moment. You are waiting. You check the time. You feel the delay. She arrives later than expected. You ask a simple question, and the response feels rehearsed, not natural, not open, just delivered. You feel it, but you stay quiet. That silence becomes costly, because silence without clarity turns into acceptance, and acceptance turns into conditioning. She learns your limits without you speaking them. She learns what you will tolerate. And slowly, your boundaries disappear without confrontation. You felt it, you ignored it. Now it is repeating. Here is the psychology. When accountability is absent, behavior expands. Not because of cruelty, because of space. If nothing is challenged, nothing adjusts. So the pattern continues. Late returns become normal. Excuses become routine. And you adjust your expectations without realizing it. Now here is the shift. You stop focusing on each excuse. You start focusing on frequency. Because truth is not in what she says once. It is in what happens repeatedly. So what do? You do not interrogate. You do not argue. You do not chase explanations. You simply observe the pattern and respond with clarity. You recognize what is happening without emotional escalation, because emotional escalation gives control away. Calm recognition keeps it with you. And here is where things tighten again. Because when behavior, timing, and emotional connection all start misaligning, one final layer begins to collapse. Her story. Number 8. The collapse of her story. At first, everything sounds fine. Her explanations fit in the moment. Her words seem organized. Her tone feels steady. But over time, cracks begin to show. You notice details changing. You notice timelines shifting. You notice small contradictions building between one story and the next. Not loud contradictions. Quiet ones. The kind you only notice if you are paying attention. Here is a simple moment. She explains where she was. Later, the details are slightly different. Not enough to confront, but enough to notice. You hear it. You store it. You compare it later. And the gaps appear. This is where most men get stuck. They look for proof, something undeniable, something final. But truth rarely arrives as proof. It arrives as inconsistency, and inconsistency builds over time. You felt it, you ignored it. Now it is repeating. Here is the mistake. You try to fix the story. You ask more questions. You push for clarity. You try to line everything up. But confusion grows when you feed it attention. So instead of gaining clarity, you become part of the cycle. Here is the shift. You stop chasing explanations. You stop trying to repair contradictions. You step out of the need for perfect answers because you already see the pattern. And once you see it, forcing clarity from someone else loses meaning. So you do something different. You observe. You listen. And when the story no longer aligns, you stop relying on it. Not with anger, with awareness. That is where control returns. Because now you are no longer reacting to what she says. You are responding to what you consistently see. And that difference changes everything. Now here is the final layer. After all 8 signs, the real question is no longer about her behavior. It is about your awareness. Because ignoring patterns is a choice, and so is facing them. You are no longer confused. You are informed. And with that information comes responsibility. To stop lying to yourself. To stop explaining away what repeats. To stop trading clarity for comfort. So here is your turning point. You decide what you act on. Not her words, not her stories, not your fears. Your awareness. If something can be repaired, you address it with honesty. If it cannot, you step back with dignity. No emotional collapse, no chasing, no denial, just clarity. Because self-respect does not survive confusion, it survives truth. And once you choose truth, everything else becomes simpler. You are no longer reacting, you are observing patterns. And that is where control returns. Now end this fully. Like the video, share it, subscribe, drop your city in the comments, and tell the truth you have been avoiding. Because someone watching needs to hear it through you before they lose themselves in silence.